much for coming. Our idea behind this panel is to use performance and sort of alternative methods to engage in a conversation about reproductive rights. There's been a lot of public commentary bantered around in the media, but not necessarily through the voices of embodied women. There have been a few protests across the country where women have put their bodies on the line to protest decisions made by their state representatives or state legislatures, but we haven't seen those bodies in action, and so we wanted to bring those bodies and those stories into this space. Come on in. So what we're going to do, we have some narrative work here, some autoethnography, and some body tales. So the work that I do, for those of you who aren't familiar, is improvisational somatic practice. So I move first, and I let my body tell me what the story is. So I have no idea what's going to happen for me in the next 5 minutes. Well, I have a little idea. So just to plant that seed. And then at the end, I'm going to actually, when we're done, I'm going to invite you to participate in whatever way you feel comfortable. And then after about a half an hour of those total performances, we'll then open up to a larger conversation, and we'd love to hear your thoughts not only about this work, but about this issue, and in particular, how we navigate this issue in our classrooms and our universities, which is something that we don't often have a conversation about. Thank you. Okay, you can do that. She needs the bing. She's got the bing. Okay, good. But she doesn't. Can you time 5 minutes?
Yeah, okay. Wait, Dane, you at 5?
Yes, please. Don't look at me. Door. I want to go through that door. I don't want to do this part. I don't want to do this part. I don't want you to look at me. I don't want to do this part. I don't want you to look at me. Can you look just here? Don't look at, no, don't look here. Just look, maybe just look here. Just look at my hand. Please just, my hand is powerful. There's a lot of power in this hand. Okay, actually it's in this hand because I'm right-handed. This is the hand. This is the hand that fills out my ballot. Oh, in these little lines like this, about who I choose. Who I choose. I choose. I choose. I choose. This is very hard. This is a very hard choice to make. This is a very hard choice to make because I don't have the space and autonomy to make the choice on my own, because I'm not by myself. You're in this room with me, and I can't make the choice I want to make right now in this room because you're here. See, this is my private space. This is my private sphere. I'm doing a lot of work with rhetorical theory this year. This is my private sphere, and you are not allowed to make decisions about what happens in this private sphere, because Roe versus Wade says this is a decision, this is a matter of privacy, right? This is a matter of privacy between myself and my doctor about the decisions that I make about what goes on in here. This is my private sphere, except it's not private because somebody has reached in and said, I get to decide what happens here. So I have no private space. My body is not private. This space here belongs to everyone in this room. You've all decided what happens here based on how you voted. You've decided for me what happens here. And depending on what state I'm in, literally, depending on what state I'm in state of Arizona, you get to decide what goes in my body before I decide what comes out of my body. What is that? How is that private? How is that a private thing? Okay, so since my body isn't private, this space here belongs to you, so I can't keep it private anymore. This space here is all legislated and controlled by you. So I can't keep it private and safe anymore. I have to give it to you to make decisions about what happens here. Because you and your hand control what happened here. This is not my private space anymore. I want private space. I want private space, but somebody said what has to happen here.
Congressman Joe Walsh, with modern technology and science, you can't find one instance. There is no exception, as in the life of the mother.
U.S. Senate candidate Richard Murdoch. And I think even when life begins in a horrible situation of rape, that it is something that God intended to happen.
Foster Frace. This contraceptive thing, my gosh, it's so inexpensive. Back in my day, they used to put bare aspirin for contraceptive. The gals would put it between their legs. They wouldn't open them at all.
My body isn't private. So you can just write your legislation all over my body. You can write your choice over my body. Where is my choice? Where's my private choice? Where's my decision? Where's my ability not to be exposed? So that means, since you have the right to legislate all over my body belongs to you. It belongs to you. My body belongs to you. So what decision do you make for me? It's not my private space anymore. Do I trust you? Can't you trust me to make the choice myself? How come nobody trusts me? Public space.
Core samples from 7 Meditations on a Question, My High School List, and Facts on Reproductive Freedom. Things I must remember. High school list circa 1964. Roman numeral 1. Never talk about people. Roman numeral 2. Never repeat what someone says to you in confidence or not meaning it. Children sometimes say, when I grow up, I'm never going to get married and have children. And we laugh, knowing they will probably change their minds. But what if that wasn't an option? Do you have children? Do you? How about you? In the 1950s, there's no question. You have children if you can, adopt if you can't, or seem suspect, incomplete. Mom says, you didn't really think about it, you just did it. Dad says, if I didn't have children, I could live like a king. A prince of medicine, a surgeon, to have anything I want. Cars, yachts, houses, women. My older sister took this to mean that he didn't really want us. I figured he was just looking at the imaginary road not taken and wondering, like we all do, what if? Roman numeral 3. Don't shout at other players when you're playing sports. 4. Don't swear, ever. Number 5. Talk softly. Think before you speak.
U.S. Supreme Court, Griswold versus Connecticut, 1965, legalized birth control and established a, quote, right to privacy that protected citizens from government interference in marital childbirth decisions that took place in the bedroom.
Still, I got the message from everywhere. You should definitely have children, but they will ruin your life. Nobody said it quite like that. It was more like, it will change your life forever. It's not about you anymore. And for women, you can't do it all. My mother said over and over, I gave up my career to have you. Not that I minded. I wanted to give up my career to have you. But I just want you to know that I gave up my career to have you. How does one make up for such a sacrifice? Roman numeral 6. Confide about your problems, parentheses, when you feel you should to increase friendship, and parentheses, parentheses crossed out. 7. Don't be too sensitive. 8. Look for people's good points. In the 60s, people say, you want to have children, don't you, someday when you grow up? I say, not right now. I'd like an education, travel, a good job, then I'll think about it. In college, you have to have a reason to get birth control at the health center. An engagement ring, irregular periods, pimples. I have none of these, but I give it up anyway to a nice Jewish boy who tells me only Gentiles get their girls pregnant. In my case, he was right. He goes on to become a renowned eye surgeon. I graduate and carry on with my plan. In the 1970s comes Roe v. Wade. Thank goodness. Because I moved to San Francisco where I know no one and still managed to get pregnant while waiting a month for my appointment at Planned Parenthood for birth control. They were overscheduled, underfunded even then. Condoms were a thing of the past. It was birth control pills for women only. Men took no responsibility. I told the guy I was dating I wasn't on the pill. He didn't believe me. He didn't stop. There were no words like date rape. I had gotten myself into a compromising position. So, I made a choice. It was all over so fast except the depression. If it wasn't for my friend Donna, the speed freak down the hall, and we did walks in the park, not drugs, I never would have gotten out of bed again. But if I hadn't made that choice, well, there was no showing up to graduate school pregnant, no baby showers or excited grandparents, no child care, no job, just an illegitimate child, a bastard, not even a love child, just a mistake. Roman numeral 9, be outgoing. Have parties, think of things you could do. 10, be friendly to everyone. 11, when you make a mistake, learn by it and don't do it again.
Fact. Attorney General Kamala Harris announced the end of the rape kit backlog that had previously delayed the analysis of evidence collected through forensic examinations for months in the state of California. In other states, the backlogs extend for many months or even years. In Michigan, there are 11,000 rape kits waiting to be analyzed going back to the 1980s. A victim of rape must endure a 6-hour exam to complete a rape kit that is often never analyzed in time to bring the accused perpetrator to trial. Cost of analysis, which is between $1,200 and $1,500 per kit, is usually cited as the reason for the backlog, as well as the low priority of such cases.
I'm in the back seat of a car. My parents are in the front. I'm visiting home and we are on the way to lunch. They are engaged in a hypothetical conversation about birth control. What one should do if one were young. Dad is a doctor and he says, I would not use the pill. We don't know the long-term effects. Mom says, I used the diaphragm and it worked just fine for me. Easy to use, no muss, no fuss. I say nothing, but I appreciate this rehearsed and informative talk, only wishing it had come sooner. But I love them for it. Still, the question persists in earnest. When are you going to have children? I hate to disappoint. I say, I already did in a former life. Or I'm a lesbian now and I understand breeding is optional. That used to really scare people. In the 80s, the question becomes, you don't have children? It feels like failure. I resist the temptation to lie, to make them up. Yes, my daughter is a neurosurgeon / ballerina, and we're very close. In the 90s, No niños? I say no porque I still hate saying no, and it's worse in foreign countries. I'm at a performance writing workshop with mostly very young Cubans. I am performing a piece about my love life being like cleaning the refrigerator. You don't know what's in there and if it's still good. But in translation, nobody sees the humor, but they feel my pain. And I am ashamed until I do it again later that week and understand what I have missed just going for the laughs. The thing is, I'm sure I'd feel okay about not having children if I was famous. I mean, that was the deal I made with myself. Without children, what's my excuse? Roman numeral 12. Don't do things just to follow the crowd. 13, never forget a friend. 14, don't be quite so nosy, but take interest in other people. That comes natural.
Fact, Arizona State Legislature. Under HB 2625, some employers could drop birth control coverage if they cite religious reasons for doing so. But if birth control drugs are prescribed for reasons other than contraception, the coverage would still be required.
In the new millennium, what do I have? My words, my plays, poems, stories, essays, and performances, the outpouring of a lifetime. Produced, published, or waiting, and my students. I will never retire. I will finally graduate with my last class and go out into the world, knowing I will forever miss us. It's not the same as having children, although there are similarities. You can count on hearing from them when they need you. Yes, I've missed something, as my father said I would, and my mother was right, you can't do everything. And I was right to make the choices I did. Roman numeral 15. Share life with those around you. Be happy.
A large study conducted by Jeffrey Pipert of Washington University in St. Louis from 2008 to 2010 found that free birth control led to dramatically lower rates of abortions and teen births. The project tracked more than 9,000 women in St. Louis, many of them poor or uninsured. These women experienced far fewer unintended pregnancy than national averages.
The effect on teen pregnancy was striking. 6.3 births per 1,000 teenagers compared to the national rate of 34 births per 1,000 teens. There also were substantially lower rates of abortion, 4.4 to 7.5 abortions per 1,000 women compared to the national rate of almost 20 abortions per 1,000 women.
Millions of U.S. women are beginning to gain access to contraception without copays under President Barack Obama's health care law, foreshadowing the policy's potential impact.
The right to choose is the right to life.
It's complicated. See, until I had my child, I was often mistaken for a sister on my campus, as in a nun. A sister of the holy names of Jesus and Mary. Apparently, Anastasia is a fairly common community name. It means resurrection. And consequently, for a long time, I blended in. I know enough mystical aspects of Catholicism to feel comfortable as a guest at the table. I know prayers. I know when to stand, when to kneel, when to sit. I know when those who are in the church, and I know what they believe my place to be. I even know how to get a blessing from the priest during Holy Communion without ever taking the bread and blood of Christ. So, up until the blessing part, it's actually fairly difficult to tell that I'm not a Catholic. I don't wear anything that distinguishes me as an outsider. I'm on board with the sisters' values. It's how I got hired. Educational institutions sponsored by the Sisters of the Holy Names commit themselves to the fulfillment of the human potential through these core values. I carry it with me wherever I go to remind me. Full development of the human person. Education in the faith. Hospitality,
dedication to women and children, dedication to justice, service to people who are poor or marginalized, commitment to liberating action, love for the names of Jesus and Mary. I am all aboard when it comes to radical hospitality. I'm all about it. Education of the whole persons, attention to women and children and marginalized people, that is me. But they weren't going to buy an immaculate conception theory when I became pregnant. So it's complicated. See, I can maneuver through most situations with some grace. Most of the SNJMs know my secret, but we don't speak of it. My father grew up a devoted Catholic, and at one point even considered the priesthood. He never told me why he stopped being a Catholic. He became an Episcopalian. My mom, I think, grew up a Protestant, or a Methodist. I mean, maybe a Presbyterian. Actually, I don't know for sure, but she does currently teach yoga at a small Methodist church in Marion, Arkansas. My parents know my secret too. It's complicated. It's a delicate line of disclosure, this secret. You see, I'm that body. The one students look to on campus when they cannot reconcile their faith and their bodies. When they have made a choice that led them to an outcome that positioned them to have to make more choices. I am an outsider, the one who lives at the edge of town, one that their parents warned them about, feminist, spiritualist with a dark woman's heart and soul born in a pale body. This, according to my African and African American senior students in my culture, gender, and identity class, they named me. In other times, they might have had to suffer in silence as I burned in order to save their lives. It is a high compliment. It's complicated. The one who knows all the phone numbers, knows the contacts, who shuts the door and helps look at all the choices. No judgment, just compassion. It's complicated. I think what surprises me most is that some people who are attached to this illusion that they can regulate our body parts actually think that they can do it in the long term. Anybody who knows bodies knows a body or can find another body who knows a body in their community, and that body knows other ways. I come from a very long line of those bodies. Wise bodies, healers, seers, educated by tradition, generations, and faith in relationship with body. The day that I graduated from my doctoral program, my father gave me a sweatshirt that simply read, "Dangerously Educated." My father is a very smart man. It isn't complicated. A pinch of belladonna, a cup of black cohosh, pennyroyal, but be very, very careful with the pennyroyal, and peppermint and honey to make it less bitter. Watch the moon. Track it, and you will know. Just an old wives' tale. These hands know how to catch a baby. I have no license except dangerous education and 3 years apprenticing with a midwife. Heck, these days you can look it up on YouTube if you need to. I came to a crossroads when I had to choose between the academy and the process of supporting women in giving birth, because babies don't really come until they are ready. They don't come on your schedule unless you elect to have a cesarean. Now I use my voice and my body to speak for reproductive justice, inside and outside the academy. I mean, when did people, and I say people because I think most of us have deeply colonized minds, begin to think that they could regulate our bodies? When was the first time someone tried to regulate your body? When was the first time someone tried to regulate your body?
Day one. Same answer.
They've been regulating my body since before I got here.
Same.
So we do remember. Regulating our bodies is lucrative business. Whole industries have sprung up in order to support efforts to regulate bodies and to sanction embodiedness. Though it's complicated. I live inside the tension of making space for disagreement. I struggle to support my students and their spiritual lives without actively trying to get them to buy into my political agenda. And don't doubt me, I have a political agenda. This is not an easy task when media offers no nuance, and we are so often publicly polarized in our politics. What do I do when I cannot agree and my paycheck comes from an institution that by title suggests that I am very differently aligned? It is complicated. But I remember the core values that my sisters and I work to uphold. Full development of the human person, hospitality, dedication to women and children, service to people who are poor or marginalized. Best of all, commitment to liberating action. That's not complicated. That's not complicated.
I am a researcher. I am. It's an identification. It's like saying I'm Mormon or I'm from Detroit. Tells you things about me. And though I'm not Mormon and I'm not from Detroit, I am, in fact, a researcher. And I think I'm pregnant. I hope so. I want to be. And I've been feeling really sick for a couple weeks. And you know that as soon as you're pregnant, your body starts producing HCG, which is the human chorionic gonadotropin, and it's a part of the placenta, and it doesn't matter. I knew that I would need to wait 6 more days to take a legit in-home pregnancy test, like anxious teenagers do every day. But I knew that a blood test would show it sooner. Yes, I shall call the doctor. Ma'am, I'm confused. Do you feel like you're pregnant, but you haven't missed a period? Totally. It's not possible for you to be sick and not have missed a period yet, but I am. I'm really sick. I feel nauseous, and I sort of have this like low ache in my ovaries. Ma'am, if you're sick, you need to see your primary care doctor, okay? This is not an issue for your OB. There's no way this is related to a pregnancy that's not even confirmed yet. I was careful not to cite research that might prove her incorrect. They don't like that. I remember when the 21-year-old aspiring researcher made the same mistake when she spoke to the nurse about birth control. Ma'am, what kind of birth control are you using? Just condoms and natural family planning. I'm sorry, condoms and what? Natural family planning is a standard days method, basal body temperature, ovulation tracking. I know what it is. That's not a method, okay? That's a dangerous game if you ask me. Before I knew better. Really? Because the National Institute of Health thinks it's a method, and they actually categorize it as a method, and they peg its failure rate about the same as typical usage of condom, which is about 17% in their most recent results. But, well, ma'am, not many people know what that is or know how to do it correctly, so maybe that's because you tell them it's not a method. Maybe it's because you would have to trust your body in order to do it and be in tune with yourself, and maybe because it's free. But I had come a long way in the last 7 years, and I knew that they did not like to be questioned, so I kept quiet and I made an appointment. They insisted it be with my primary care doctor, but I didn't care. He wasn't buying my story either. Ma'am, if this is an issue with your vagina tract, you're gonna need to see your OB, because that's actually not something that I deal with. You know, if there were a such thing as a vagina tract, which there isn't, half your patients would have one, yet you seem pretty disgusted by the whole thing. But no time to absorb the outrage right now. Give me that test. The blood test came back. HCG is 45. That's right. Preggers knocked up a trout in the well in the family way. This is the biggest project I've ever undertaken. I need to get to researching. I mean, the emotional demands of actually growing a human inside my body is going to be intense. But think about the physical. I mean, the actual, you know, the birthing. I wonder how soon you can actually get the epidural. Well, is that something they'll send to your house so you can administer yourself? Or do you have to wait to get to the hospital? Because I'm not all about the pain. So let's get to the researching. There's not really any study that confirms what the epidural does to the baby, since no one's signing up their baby to get a certain amount of drugs to see how much would hurt them. So, well, there does seem to be a correlation between epidurals and increased risk of C-section. C-section resulting in increased risk of infection, mother morbidity, scarring, emotional challenges that interrupt baby bonding, and breastfeeding. Oh, damn it. A natural birth? Having a natural birth would mean actually trusting that what my body was doing was normal, was right. That there wasn't really anything I needed the medical establishment to fix or heal or treat. That I wasn't sick, in fact. I saw the doctor's screen on another routine, and now I know totally unnecessary appointment. Gina Stallrico, medical number 56849, major medical conditions, obesity, hearing loss, pregnancy. Hey, I do not have hearing loss, okay? That is a mistake, and I don't know how it got in there, but it needs to be taken out. Fat and pregnant, yes. Those are two very serious medical conditions I'm dealing with, but I do not have hearing loss. I hear great, too well, actually. My pregnancy was an illness, a disorder. Something was wrong with me.
But you can only get pregnant if you're in the missionary position.
You can't get pregnant during your period.
Don't lift your weights or your breasts will simply shrink.
We must increase our busts.
Women don't masturbate. And if they do, men.
If you use tampons, you can lose your virginity.
If it's a legitimate rape, the female body has a way of shutting that whole thing down.
It was very early on in the pregnancy that I came to see the way I was forced to disembody from myself. Strangers touching me, doctors grabbing and prodding at me without my permission. I was a carrier of not only this baby, but this strange and serious medical problem. I was once again disregarded, and I continued to make the mistake of citing research and not shutting up enough, and it was always seen as an attack. isn't it true that it's not medically necessary for me to have the IV and it might inhibit my ability to move around during labor? Can I possibly do like a squatting position? Because I heard that actually opens the cervix a little bit more. Is there a birth tub on premises here? Because I really want to do the whole water birth thing. Can we bring our birth ball in? Is that a problem? Our doula actually wants to come on the hospital tour, so I don't know if that's possible, but you know, we actually want to hold off on the vaccines, especially hepatitis, because I don't think she's going to be like using IV drugs or having unprotected sex right away. So we want to just hold off on that just for a couple of weeks if that works. Isn't it true that my body can be trusted? I am aware that medical intervention can save lives, mother and baby. Babies engage in unsafe positions. Mothers have medical problems, but birth, by virtue of being birth, is not a problem. Intervention as a practice concerned me. It was a given. Birth is dangerous, okay? Birth is scary. I had seen it on TV. I had seen all of the movies. Babies being whisked away to give intervention, mothers screaming, people freaking out. It had never crossed my mind that most birth was safe and normal. Until I started doing research. And I discovered that the US has one of the highest mother morbidity rates in the developed world. And many people believe it's largely because of our desire to fix something that was never broken in the first place. Many of the women I knew cared more about the type of stroller they would buy than the type of birth they would have. It was much easier to control that external. Nursery colors, names, the embodiment was tough. The internal was overwhelming. So once again, I had to turn to someone else to take care of it, to take care of me, as I had been my whole life carefully taught to put my body and trust in someone else's hands.
We don't want you to worry about that.
Trust me, okay? I'm the doctor.
We've seen thousands of births. We know what we're doing.
But I'm not sick, and nothing is wrong until something is wrong. And by the time something was wrong, I had no idea who to trust. I was itching. It was terrible. Centralized in my hands and feet, and I was weak and exhausted, 8 months pregnant, fat and pregnant and still hearing great. Ma'am, you're itching? Is that what I hear you saying? Because itching in pregnancy is very normal, okay? Stretching of the skin is a common thing to happen. No, I know that, but it's not itching on my stomach, it's in my hands and my feet. I'm really tired, I really feel like something's wrong. Ma'am, pregnancy is tiring. Okay? If you're still itching in a week, we'll give you some Benadryl, but trust me, this is normal. But I knew it wasn't normal. I knew something was wrong, and I am a researcher. So I started researching. And I found it. Intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. I want to be tested for this.
You don't have that.
I want to be tested for this.
You don't have that.
Oh, come on, WebMD girl.
But I had that. Intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy occurs in late pregnancy and triggers intense itching, usually in the hands and feet. It can be dangerous for developing baby and associated with serious complications including stillbirth, premature birth, and fetal distress. Stillbirths tend to happen without warning in the last few weeks of pregnancy from mothers who go undiagnosed. My water broke at 11 p.m., 3 weeks early. Cholestasis of pregnancy can cause early labor. So I called the hospital. Ma'am, are you sure your water has broken? Well, I'm not positive, but I don't usually pee clear liquid onto the carpet until it's soaking wet without being able to stop, so I really fucking think so! 24 hours, hospital policy. We're gonna start an IV, but I don't want an IV. If you could, I need to get the fuck out of this hospital, okay? I've never done this before, but I took the PhD level birth class and I know what I'm talking about, and I need to get out of here. They had me by the uterus. If I stayed in this hospital, they were gonna make me deliver within 24 hours. It's been 14 hours, and I know the studies say the 24-hour guideline is somewhat arbitrary, and I need to get out of here. So I did. Against medical advice, I left the hospital. At home, realizing that in this pregnancy and in my life, I had been tricked into total disembodiment from myself. During this pregnancy, during puberty, during the first years that I was having sex, was I even myself in my own body, or was I simply the shell scratching and clawing against a culture that relied on shame and fear? I was at home for 2 more days in labor. Partner, doula, mother at my side, city, neighbor, community holding me, and most importantly, for the first time, holding myself, connecting, listening to the silence, and knowing I was on the edge of the most amazing leap, if I could trust the fall. Finally, my body overtly told me it was time. I wanted to stay right here in the comfort and silence of my living room floor and deliver her right here. But I go back to the hospital. I go into a trance while my sisters, my partner, and my doula fought.
She doesn't need an IV.
They aren't doing the vaccines until later. She wants to be on the birth ball.
No, we already told the other nurse we aren't doing an IV.
She needs to move around. She needs a mirror set up so she can see herself pushing.
No, she doesn't want an IV.
Can you leave us alone?
They fought, but I hardly knew. Georgia was born just 4 hours after we got to the hospital. 3 weeks early, my little bundle of passion. My own heart moving outside of my body. My own soul screaming out. She was here, fighting, exhausted. And now the fight continues so that I can live gloriously and watch her live gloriously in her own body, not just a shell, so that she might feel the heart that beats inside her, so that her fight might be, could be, will be a little less.
How have our bodies been controlled by stigma and shame? How has the state intruded on the privacy of your bedroom, of your body, and forced you to make choices that were not your own? Please show me how. Please show me how. This is the body that moves in my own private space with all of these words and thoughts and laws and regulations already inscribed upon my body in my own private space that I must then walk out into the world in. And I walk into my classroom with. And so do all of my students. But I have to hide those things because they're not what I'm supposed to show. Because that part of me is supposed to stay private. It's not supposed to be the thing that I bring into the classroom with me. It's the thing that has marked my body and my students' bodies, but we don't show that in the classroom. We can't talk about it in the classroom because we're supposed to cover up and pretend that the ways that we have been shamed and silenced and inscribed upon by the state and by our universities don't come into the classroom. And yet if we don't teach our students how to have a conversation about controlling the choices and decisions that are necessary for them to control and be autonomous human beings, then we cheat them of the opportunity to learn the most valuable thing that they can communicate to themselves at the polls, in their families, in their churches, and in the Capitol building. And on their ballot. My body is already written on, and so are yours. When will we bring that forward and show those places that we keep hidden or private so that someone else controls the public conversation? Thank you. So I'd like to invite us now, thank you very much. We're just going to come up here and pretend to be in charge of a conversation, but we really don't want to be. So we want to open it up to all of us to have this conversation, to try and trouble that place between our private lives, individual choices, and our public classroom conversations. Does anybody have anything they want to share, thoughts?
I'll start it off. I couldn't write on you.
I couldn't use my agency to label your own. And I think that's part of the conversation, is us taking a step to protest with our own body and embodiment, to say that we're not going to continue to label and destroy each other.
Thank you.
I just want to acknowledge a couple of things. This was a really beautiful panel, and I appreciate the ways that you wove the performances together. And you know, I have that initial impulse to start clapping after the first one, and then I appreciated that we held the performance through the whole thing, and you allowed space for that. And I think that makes the work sing together in some really beautiful ways. And there are lots of content things that are resonating, but I think that having this kind of performance for students would be a space to begin to have those conversations. I know you were nervous about the duration of kind of being exposed, and I appreciate you putting your body on the line.
Especially given the chill in the room.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much for your stories. I know personally I feel really, really charged right now. I don't know how else to describe it, but charged. And in the same way there is and I think it's a productive discomfort with I know it's not necessarily a conclusion, but where the piece leaves us. And and I do think that's a productive discomfort, and yet at the same time, I wanna write different things, and I wanna cross things out. And I was thinking about the word that I wrote on your body, and just thinking about some of the stories that you all shared about agency and when that gets taken from our bodies and what we do with that. And if it would be okay, I would like to a line from a performance that I created about my own experience of attempting to heal and reclaim my own body through sexual agency. And if I could just share just a brief passage with you, if that would be okay. It's from a piece entitled Affirmative Action Sex, and so I look at affirmative action and that language and breaking the phrase apart to reframe for myself one way that I think I attempt healing for myself. And this is one of the stanzas about the affirmative part of affirmative action sex. This is affirmative action sex. The kind of sex that makes reparations for other kinds of sex, well, not really sex, but unwanted forms of sexual contact that make my reaction to wanted sexual contact more hesitant, more cautious, more inhibited. She told everyone I let him bang me. Bang me, baby. Because I am here with you now, and your fingers are fucking the fear from my body, and onto the sheets are fluids repainting the walls they scribbled on. My canvas is not blank, but the colors mix beautifully. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I guess my question had to do with, too, I'm having some sort of reaction I can't articulate as well. It was a great performance, because I think it brings back a lot of stories of violation in multiple forms. And so talking about having this conversation with our students, how would I don't want to say, I don't want to stop them from, if it triggers something in them, I want them to experience that, but I don't want to be like, well, it's 45 minutes, we gotta go.
Right.
You leave them with this feeling, and I'm talking about undergraduates, so how would you suggest that you can start these conversations but not, I have no idea, I'm not articulating this well.
It is I mean, for me, it does feel like a blurring of boundaries sometimes, or a permeation of boundary, not a blurring, but there is a fluidity if you're going to engage in something beyond the academic discussion, and the very real reality of students' lives. And Holy News is located in Oakland, California, so it's a very diverse population and a very challenged population in a lot of ways around these issues. And so that's, for me, I literally have the mission of the sisters and to talk with them too. I don't talk about the choices necessarily, but it's just letting people know that you're a safe zone, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I know, and
But that goes beyond, I think, the question you're asking is how do you engage this conversation in the classroom. So one is, I'm an ally, you can speak to me in my office if you need help. But I think the reason we wanted to do this panel, at least my investment in it, is I don't know how to create that conversation in the classroom. Sometimes, things will come up in speeches and we'll have a conversation, but most of us have taught or will teach the core course in interpersonal communication, right? Or have some semblance of that in the class that we have to teach. The most important interpersonal conversations that can be had are about your own need and your own desire and your own safety. We don't spend time in the classroom, in our textbooks, articulating how we communicate about that with other people, how we say no clearly, how we say yes clearly, how we talk about things that are private and stigmatized with our partners. How do we talk about or reveal that we have an STD, or that we've had other sexual issues? Like, these are fundamental things, and yet we can't talk about them in the space of 45 minutes, right? But if we don't start the conversation, where do our college-age fucking students, because they are doing that, know how to talk about it if they come from a place that hasn't helped them talk about that before? And I'm seeing some, I see your response to that, and part of me wants to engage that and know.
Sure. I mean, in my personal dating life, I am very good about talking about this stuff, but I'm recently having partners who are like, nobody's ever talked to me about this before, and I'm like,
How did
you're
that
35 years old.
Yeah.
How did nobody ever talk to you about this before? I don't understand how this conversation never happened.
Oh, I wanted to kind of piggyback on all of this. I think one of the things is the nature of what we teach, regardless of what the course is that it's not really like, this is statistics, and now go back to your life, where you're not going to see that formula in your life. The nature of what we teach is that, you know, if we're teaching some interpersonal theory, they're going to go home and their roommate's going to do that conflict thing we just taught. So it's so a part of their life that it's like counterintuitive not to really be like, this relates to your life. Now let's see how we do it in practice. And I spend a really good chunk of time, even in the core course that I teach, which is like the intro class, talking specifically about communicating about safer sex, and I find a way to make it related to the chapters. And I have never, ever taught that, ever, even in tiny classes, and not had some student come up to me after class and say, I was raped, my partner's hitting me. I think my mom is being abused. You know, one of these things. Never have I given that lecture, and not including, I gave it as a sample lecture to the grad students at San Francisco State 2 weeks ago, and had a grad student come up to me and say, I think I'm in an abusive relationship. So that is the nature of it, but every time I do that, what that means is more work for me, just to be logistical. Like now we call Student Health Center, now we call Psychological Services, now I'm probably gonna call you on my drive home from work and just check in with you. And all of these other things, more work for me, and, oh my God, yay, just what we wanted. Academia and real life and personal growth, like right where we were always hoping it was headed. So in a lot of ways it's very muddy, and there are many times where I'll tell my students, you know what, I'm really not qualified to like help you with this. Like I am not the Rape Crisis Center, I have no idea. I just love you and I'm so glad you told me, and we need to go get some help, you know. So sometimes it's like, for me, referring people to other places.
Right.
But I think when you start that dialogue and then you give that foundation of, we're all talking about this out loud, you've created, we're all talking about this out loud. Someone in that class is gonna say, yeah, well, you know, I had a female student say, I'm not proud to say this, but I actually was abusive to my boyfriend one time, and I ended up going into counseling, and it was like, as soon as she said that, everyone else just had something to share like that. I mean, that's the nature of self-disclosure. So I think bringing it into the classroom is incredibly powerful, and we continue that because it's a part of our field, you know, to continue those discussions.
I think also bringing somebody else in to help catalyze that can be helpful as well. So in addition to teaching my own classes, I actually work for a crisis center doing prevention work, and I often bring performances into classes. So I was in a first-year experience class last week presenting a piece where we started talking about safety issues on campus, and that led to a clarifying of what is sexual consent, and they were wrapping it into a section they were doing on friendship. Which on a surface level seems a little bit, you know, like really that's what you're talking about, friendship. But the instructor was perceptive enough, you know, to bring me in to start some of those conversations. And I think sometimes bringing somebody else in can be helpful, and also then also, you know, depending on who the folks are that you're, you know, introducing to your students, they may be able to hang out afterwards and provide some of that immediate, which I do a lot, even after I present in classes, other folks' classes. And so I think that's a good, I often bring other folks into classes when the issues are issues that I don't feel as confident with. And I think that's a practice that we can utilize in lots of ways, but I think that would also be one idea for getting yourself started. It can be a really good catalyst. And it puts some responsibility on that person that you might not necessarily have to take on right away.
There's also, sometimes I've done it, if you want to do it more indirectly to lead into it, I'll have a class talk about their experiences with sex education in the schools, like did you have any, what was it, and then everybody starts talking about that, and then that really leads into a discussion about those issues. It starts at, that feels safe, and then they can get into more personal things. And then when you ask, well, what happens when the bell ends, because that's always really crucial. And somehow the most personal, you know, thing comes up just when the bell's going to ring. And people always know that, and then they say, well, and so sometimes it's like, okay, I want everybody to write for me for next time something that they want, that they felt about it, you know, after right then, and we'll we'll start off next time in small groups, and then you can decide to share it. But, I think a writing thing really helps, because, that invariably will happen. But please write down what you're feeling right now and bring it in, next time. And you don't have to share it, but just write about it, and you can choose to share it. That gives people an avenue for that, because inevitably that happens, and I don't think that's accidental. I think because people want to say it, but they're afraid to discuss it. And then, of course, as you say, inviting people to come up and talk with you. And you're right, I always say I'm not a psychologist, but I play one on television. But you do have the resources, and just open that up. And Christine, you said you had your hand up to say something.
Yeah, I mean, indirectly related. It actually took me a really long time to synthesize this thought. So I'm very appreciative of all of the performances and the ways that each of you took a very serious risk in putting yourselves out there. And the contradiction that I'm really stuck with kind of at the end is that in order to protect ourselves, we have to put ourselves out there.
Right, yeah.
And it's a very, very strange space. And I mean, for, maybe different for other people, but it's also a little bit disturbing to me that I have to let people in to get them out.
That's right.
And I mean, and I'm not talking about our students, like the discussions, that we have, and especially those mentoring relationships. I'm not talking about that, but we have to have these conversations with people who are pissing us off, who
Right.
are invading our spaces, and we have to let them in before kicking them out. And
Yeah.
it just makes me really, concerned about how far do we have to go with that.
Right.
And so I very much appreciate the risks that you all took today. I'm not sure that I'm willing to take that kind of risk to have people up in me.
Yeah, right. Well, it's interesting because in the can I talk a little bit, disclose a little bit about conversation? So in the discussions prior to this, when Suzanne and I often, for those of you that don't know, often dance together, often do the work that she does together, and this topic was so vulnerable for me that I decided I was going to have to write something and have to speak it, because I couldn't. She was asking, she made a choice to ask you to tell you you need to write on her body. And I was so clear. Remember the reaction I had? I said, no, somebody's going to walk up and start writing on me, I'm going to hit him. And, because I cannot. I can't. And so it was a really interesting dialogue around how far are you willing to go, what is your risk level. And that's not to say that I didn't risk it other ways. I looked up what my faculty handbook says about what I can say or not say, and it's very specific in my handbook about curriculum and how do you link it back. So I am well loved and well liked on my campus, but I have it on my iPad, my faculty handbook, so that when I get called into the dean's office, I open it and I say, this is what it says about academic freedom, and this is exactly how I'm relating it to my curriculum, so that you are really clear that if I'm talking about these issues on this campus where the climate is blah, 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 this is how it's happening. I also want to maybe attend to that. In performance and in autoethnography and a lot of narrative practice, we talk about embodiment, right? Bringing our bodies, attending to our bodies, because our bodies have had these experiences and this body's way of knowing. And yet we come to conferences and we watch people present papers and they're not in their body. They're reading to us. And I come to conferences because I want to be in body space with other people and learn how my body will learn from you by seeing and being in the presence of your body doing your scholarship. And even if that's in conversation. So I knew that I wanted to put my body on the line, because there are ways that the way that activists put their bodies on the line and take that risk. And I want to do that. I sometimes do that in my classroom. Last year I did it was my first year of my doctoral program, and I did my master's culminating experience for both in my master's year, and it was open performance, and then I did it at my new university. And my students came to both of those performances, and it was a performance about the stillbirth of my son, and it's that story. And there's a lot of raw everything in it. And I talked with all of my advisors about being worried. what would that do then? My students now seeing me in this different way, right? And all of those students that came to those performances articulated in their final reflection papers how that changed their engagement with the class, because they took bigger risks after they saw me taking that risk.
That's true. And can I address what you were saying too? I think you should say to the class and yourself, you only need to self-disclose what you feel comfortable with. And one of the things I do with the sex education one is after people have shared their sex education stories, then I put them in groups and they design what they think would be a good sex education class. How would that work so they can put their ideas into a solution. And, it'll go as personal as people want to go or not. And I haven't shared this with the class, because actually this piece has been an evolution. And I know a lot of my students now are very anti-choice, and so I don't know what their response would be to that story. And I'd like to have the courage to do it in front of them. But I've really seen the evolution of change in my teaching career over those attitudes about that. For most people, young women being pro-choice, I used to give this example of how to frame a debate question, and to the worst example I ever had in a 150 class, fundamentals class, where I asked them in the groups to formulate their question, and this man said, the question is whether or not a woman should be allowed to murder her children. And when I put that out in my Women in Words class, some people, this first time that I got people responding to that as a legitimate way to frame the question, and I about fell over. I said, oh my God, I said, okay, wait a minute, something's wrong. But it shows you how much some attitudes have changed and go to the right, and that they didn't immediately think that was a horrible way to frame the question, and a horribly biased way to frame the question.
And also in our conversations too, the place that we came to was, we want, it is a responsibility that we create a space for people to have their own ideologies and their own opinions, right? But it always is about that choice, because a particular ideology, you can hold that, but if that ideology controls what happens to my body, then you've transgressed that space. Right? So then we have to find a way to talk about, you can feel that way. You don't have to have an abortion. You don't have to want to have your tax dollars go to that abortion. But the minute that your freedom about controlling the decisions that you want to make with your body infringes on the freedom for somebody else to control the choices they make with their own body, don't you see how that's
immoral?
That is a conflict. And we can attend maybe to that, because I think that's a place of tension that we don't often sophisticate enough.
That's what I realized. We realized that's what we lost. When the moral high ground went all to the pro-life people, and then when you realize that when you're saying, I have the right to choose what you do with your body, then the federal government now owns every woman's body. So that to me is immoral. You don't have the right to choose for me. That's why I said it is. The right to choose is the right to life, because if I don't have that choice, then how can I be a citizen? How can I have, I'm a slave if somebody else, we have a theocracy. If somebody's, religious views then are determining everyone's life. For me, then that's where that comes down, right? So I realized we're going to have that fight again. It's just hard to believe that that's where I came in.
One of the interesting things I was going to end the piece with, and I didn't, because I told you I don't really know what's going to happen when I do it, is that the interesting thing, all those quotes that you heard from those legislative representatives, the senators, whatever, about, aspirin between the knees and legitimate rape and shut that whole thing down, all of them got voted out of office. But the interesting thing is that as those lines, we all, a lot of us know those lines because they've been repeated in the media and on TV and in the newspaper, but there was no embodied response to those words, right? And so I'm interested in the lone legislative woman, there's two, but one, Jackie Spear out of California, is the first woman to disclose on the U.S. House of Representatives floor during a debate that she'd had an abortion.
Yeah.
And it was on this legislation that was going to, that the House wanted to pass on controlling or banning abortion, and right. Yeah, and so she came out and said it, and then there was a Republican in the state house in Montana that during a really atrocious bill that they were trying to pass to limit abortion and contraception, she came out and said that she'd had an abortion. So, but we don't have these ways that bodies come out, that women come out and speak, or men come out and say, this isn't right, what you're saying is wrong. There was not a legislative response to those people, right? And yet, and because of that silence, everybody thought, oh, all of these people are going to get reelected, they're really popular, this is a popular thing to say. Every one of them got voted out of office, and the gender gap in the election was 18%. So to me that says we still are afraid to risk. It's still a stigma to say we use contraception, we have abortions, we make choices, we have sex.
Became bad. I thought,
Yeah.
when did that happen? Wait a minute.
But now all of those things are still so stigmatized that we can't talk about them publicly, but we will use our ability in the polls to make our voices heard. We want to trouble the space that says, why aren't we talking about that more here? Why aren't we challenging those stigmas? Why is it still a shameful thing for a woman to say that she's had an abortion or that she's going out to buy contraception for the use of sex, preventing?
I didn't know. And I want to just make one comment that's a practicality around syllabi. And maybe other people do this too, but in my syllabus I state very explicitly that the conversations that take place in our classroom are confidential unless students are willing to disclose, so that stories become a part of the space. And I say right up front, this space is a sacred place for your stories, and so you may share the experience in a classroom or what you processed in a classroom. Please don't use names. And then I always give students the option to pass, and that there's no judgment attached to that. And anytime we walk into a space where, I don't mean literally, I mean metaphorically walk into a space where these kind of vulnerabilities exist, I remind them that they are good witnesses and good listeners, and that they always have the right to pass on having to disclose or share. I really try very hard to eliminate pressure, and I rarely have students pass. I always go around the room again, and so if you pass once, and then if you pass a second time, that's done. So, but that's a.
So
It's
thank
not all my
you
syllabus.
so much for coming. I want to give you permission to speak about my performance here and use my name. That's okay.
Oh, I wasn't saying.
I know. I'm just saying. Is that okay for everyone else?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if it's helpful to have this conversation to stimulate other conversations, please feel free to do so. And if you want to contact any one of us, you may. And if you're interested in participating in another panel, if we submit a similar panel at the next NCA, if you're interested in participating in some way, I'll turn over a piece of paper and you can write your name and address down.
Or if you'd like to have my script, I'd be happy to send it.
I took photographs.
Yes.
Didn't know.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes,
Yeah.
you have permission.
Thank
As
you
long as
very
you
much,
do-
everybody.
Yeah.
Teddy, I can't believe that.
So nice to see you again today.
I was wondering, what do you guys teach and what are your degrees in?
Oh, so we're all
Beautiful.
Scary, it's restful.
Do you do work with the mirror?
I do.
Oh, yeah, I used to do a lot of work with the mirror. Me and
I'm in communication studies, probably more, and I teach at University of San Francisco. I teach different disciplines, interpersonal communication.
Although when that's
Is in communication studies. Yeah, and my emphasis in my master's is
illustrate that you can email. Oh, you want me to give you yours? Yes. I was just gonna here, I'll give you, I don't have a word. Yes. And so you,
I'm very
I taught a semester there.
I don't teach there anymore because I teach
Congratulations.
but I teach at a community college.
Which one?
Just adjuncting. Hillsborough.
Okay.
I teach part-time in high school. I actually really,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.